So here's a look at the new rocker panel that I'm going to install. So I was planning on making my own, but I ended up finding these ones online. There's actually a place in Ontario that makes them. 85 bucks shipped to my door, so it ended up being a lot cheaper that way and easier than having to buy the sheet metal and shape it myself. So what I've done already is I've drilled holes 2 inches apart, and then I also have sprayed the back side already with rocker guard. It's the rubberized undercoating. This will just help protect it, and it's a pretty strong product, so better than just spray paint. So that'll keep this from rusting, and hopefully it'll last a long time. So I've taken the plastic cover off of here. So now I'm going to try a test fit with the new rocker panel and see how it sits on there. Okay, so it looks to fit pretty good on here. I'll be able to get it to fit a little better once I start welding, and then I can kind of pound down the areas that are have a little bit of gaps in them. You can see there's a little bit of a gap here, and same as on the front, there's a bit of a gap up here. So as I start welding, then I'll just be able to pound it down. So now that it's somewhat test fitted, what I'm going to do is take a marker and mark off where every hole is that I have drilled, and then take the panel off, and then I'm just going to sand down the paint where every hole is, and that'll just make it a lot easier to strike an arc with the welder. Alright, so I have marked where every hole is going to be. So now I'm going to take my Dremel with a little bit of a grinding tool on it, and then just grind away some of the paint, and then we should be good to go to start welding. Last thing I'm going to do before I start welding is use some self-tapping screws, and that'll help hold this in place before I start welding it on. So I got it screwed in place now, so I'm just going to check my door clearances before I go any farther. In the back here we look pretty good for the back door, but as we get to the front you can kind of see it's a little high here, and it's actually kind of touching the door a bit. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have to pound this down a little bit flatter. I can already tell, if I open the door here, that the metal is quite a bit farther in than I would like it to be. So what I'm going to do then is pound each one of these down, and then that'll give a bit less of a gap in between the sheet metal, and then that'll make it a lot easier to weld as well. So pounded it a little bit, made it a little better. Still not as much of a gap as I would like. So I can tell by just pressing down on this down here, once I clamp it down, I get a lot better door clearance. So I think what I'm going to do is get a clamp it down on the bottom here, and then I'm going to start welding on the top. Start welding these ones up here, and then that'll give me a bit more of a solid platform up here, and then I can kind of start shaping the stuff down here afterwards. So this is the welder I'm using. It's just a cheap Mastercraft flux core welder. The ground hooked up and I'm ready to go. So strike a few arcs and see what we can do. Alright, so we got most of the top ones plug welded. I've taken the self-tapping screws out of these two on top, so now I'm going to weld those. So turn my wire speed up a little bit just so I can help fill in those gaps a little more. Got all the welding done up top here, but the next step is going to be this lip here. I'm going to hit this with a hammer and kind of bend it up and over the original pinch weld. Okay, so I got that lip folded up and under the pinch weld. So next thing I'm going to do is there's a little bit of a lip left here. So I'm going to mark every 2 inches, and then I'm going to drill holes, and then I'll plug weld that as well. Got all the welding done down here on the pinch weld. So next thing I'm going to do is take the grinder and just kind of grind them a bit smooth. I'm not going to grind them flat, but I still want to keep the strength there. So just grind them a little smoother. They're going to get covered by the step anyway, so I don't see any reason to try and make them flat. Got all the welds ground down. Obviously I ground these ones flat just because there's going to be a lot of traffic through here. We don't want anyone getting snagged on any of the welds. Down here, since they're set quite a bit in because I had to pound them down, I didn't have to grind them as flat. So what I'm going to do next is get some body filler and just fill in the rest of this, and it'll smooth it out quite a bit more. It won't be perfect, but it'll be good enough for a Jeep anyway. So I did body filler, and on all the edges I did a seam sealer. I let it dry overnight and got up this morning and did some sanding. So I sanded it. It's quite smooth. Like I said, it's not going to be perfect, but it'll be good enough, I think. I'm going to be using a roll-on box liner, so that stuff's very forgiving with imperfections, so it shouldn't look too bad once it's painted. So what I'm going to do now is get onto the back side here. So I'm going to take a wire brush now and get onto the back side of the pinch weld, and then that'll clean it up, get rid of all the surface rust and whatever soot is left over from the welding. And then I'm going to spray the same rust converter on this side, and then we should be pretty close to being able to paint. While I'm waiting for the rust converter to dry on the pinch weld, I'm going to take some 40 grit sandpaper and really scuff up this steel because it's fairly smooth right now, and I want the box liner to stick to it pretty good. So got all the sanding done and got all my lines taped off the way that I want them. So I think I'm pretty well ready to start painting. So I'm using the roll-on type of box liner just because I prefer that over a spray-on. I found that with a spray-on box liner, it goes on a lot thinner, and to me it's not as strong. The roll-on goes on much thicker because they don't have to thin it out to be sprayable. Also, the first time I used it in my Civic, I tried using a roller, and it didn't roll on very nicely, so I found that using a foam paintbrush worked a lot better. It got a lot more even coverage that way. So what I'm going to do now is grab my stir stick, give it a stir. So I had to stir for quite a while because all the texture was stuck in the bottom. So it seems to be pretty consistent now. Everything's evenly distributed. So I think I'm ready to pour some of it into the pail, and we'll start painting. I've done 2 full coats on here already. I think it's starting to look pretty good. It goes on pretty thick, so it doesn't take much. I haven't even used a quarter of the can yet, so I'm still on the first bit that I poured into that container. So I'll probably do at least 2 or 3 more coats on here yet. I want it to be pretty thick. This area is going to be taking a lot of abuse, so I want to make sure that it's good and durable. So got the Jeep back from the safety shop. Been driving it for about a week now. The rocker's all passed and everything, so it's good to go. So it's a little dirty right now from driving, but turned out really good, I think, with the box liner on there. I did the steps the same way, so now everything matches. So I just finished up those today, so they're a little cleaner than the rest of it, but no, I think it turned out okay.